do is basically taking the topic from the motorbikes and the streets, and we will focus on the streets because in Istanbul, this 15-minute delivery thing, I think everyone living in Istanbul or in Turkey knows that very well, took pedestrian space away from the pedestrians again. So first, before starting the topic, I want to ask a question to our participants. So how many of you remember streets when you recall your childhood memories? Maybe top. Yeah, I can see some hands. And how many of you will let your child, if you have any or imaginary child, to the street if they want to play all by themselves? No, one there, but you are not living in Turkey, I guess. Yes, two from Denmark. Here, nice. One, okay. So, okay, I think this session is basically about this gap between the answers of these two questions. So I'm going to present my speakers. I can start with Chiara de Grandi. Chiara is an architect and researcher, and she specializes in urban regeneration and social innovation. She collaborates with Agency for Mobility, Environment and Territory of the Milan Municipality. And she works with the Officina Urbana, if I'm right, team that develop public space design and urban regeneration projects. Next speaker is Hila Berner. I will start from there. Hila is an urban planner and placemaker. She is a program associate at the Global Design Cities Initiative, and she is a member of the Streets for Kids program, and that aims to support cities and communities to transform their streets into public spaces for children and their caregivers, and for everybody, in fact. And she was also project manager for developing Israel's national planning and design guidelines for child-friendly cities as part of the Urban 95 initiative. And then I'm looking to Bronwen Thornton. Bronwen is the CEO of Walk21 Foundation. She promotes and supports the value of walking and walkable communities all around the world, literally. She is also the chair of the Africa Network for Walking and Cycling. Bronwen works closely with international agencies and cities to ensure that walking is on the table whenever they are developing solutions to tackle some challenges like climate change and public health and whatever it is. So we are going to first start with the Bronwen's presentation. You have to push this button. Yeah, Bronwen, can you explain us the value of walking and why we must reclaim and transform our streets?
Turn this one off. There, I can hear me. Yes? Okay, great. It's much easier than shouting, but being Australian, we're quite good at getting our voices to the back paddock. We agreed to have some fairly short presentations so that we can have more time for questions and discussions, so I want to be super brief about some framing. For those of you who don't know Walk21, we've actually been around since the year 2000, promoting walking, running a conference, hosting the International Charter for Walking, and working with international agencies and cities, national governments, to develop the tools and resources so that people can make different choices and value walking in their cities and their communities. There's lots of reasons why walking matters. The fantastic thing about walking is that it's the solution to everything. But you normally have to be a bit more specific when you want people to pay attention and to invest in walking. The slide I've put up here is the climate slide. We are part of a coalition called the Partnership for Active Travel and Health, and we do a lot of work with national policies and the nationally determined contributions as part of the climate talks, which this year are in the UAE. And you can see there the decarbonisation agenda is failing, the climate talks are failing, but walking is part of the solution. And when you start to look at transport solutions to the climate challenge, people love to come up with electric vehicles. Electric vehicles are not the solution for so many reasons. We need to move faster than we can transition the vehicle fleet, and walking and cycling is part of that story. The Sustainable Development Goals, I worked so hard to try and get walking mentioned in these, but it's not there, and I have to confess to that. However, when you start looking at all those different goals, walking is part of the solution to all of these challenges. No uplift from poverty, access to food, access to good health and well-being. Road safety, fundamental is to make walking safer. Access to education, gender equality, ensuring it's safe and secure for women to walk. Designing our communities and our economies to support local transitions, the infrastructure we need, and number 11, sustainable cities. We get to one where we almost get to walking. And that is SDG 11.2, which is all about proximity to public transport. Walking is the feeder mode to public transport. It's very often the only mode that people remember. It's also there for climate action. It's there for life on land. It probably isn't there for life below water. We can't walk on water yet, and we can't survive below water, but walking is part of all of these goals. And I just want to, you're going to hear from my colleagues about some of the fantastic changes that they've made on streets, so I'm giving you some framework instead for why these things have to happen at the next level. The International Transport Forum has come out with a fantastic resource about how to reallocate the streets in your cities so that they can be given to people on foot. It's very easy to imagine that the domination of motor cars that exists in our communities now is going to last forever. It's not, I promise. But you have to make considered, informed, and intelligent changes to achieve that. And the picture on the right is Times Square, which when Janetzi Khan was Commissioner for Transport under Bloomberg in the city of New York, and the initiator of Hila's organisation after she finished her time there, this put tactical urbanism and change on the street on the map. But they didn't do it willy-nilly. They did all of the traffic analysis. They actually improved traffic flows, and then they created space for people. The image in the middle is from a project that I did from a European project called Flow, which sadly they have now closed down the website. But if you want any of these resources, I'm very happy to dig into our archives, and we are trying to daylight them again. Because what the Flow project does is says that walking and cycling are part of the solution to congestion. Cities want to solve congestion. They keep creating it, but then they also want to actually solve it. And the great thing about this project is that it did cost-benefit analysis. It looked at the externalities of our transport system, looked at the health benefits, looked at the social benefits, looked at the infrastructure demands. So these are some of the tools and some of the inspiration, because you can't just come in and do these things on a whim. What we've discovered with this whole process and this whole agenda is you have to make a really good case. You have to make a doubly good case than cars need to make. The cost-benefit analysis project work around walking and cycling, the HEAT tool that World Health Organization has done, it blows the CBAs for car travel out of the water. It's so much better value to invest in walking and cycling, but we have to be 3 times, 4 times, 10 times better value to get the attention. So you have to make your case, you have to build it. But communities want it, school children want it, they want their cities to be more walkable, they're using tools to invite their authorities to do something about it. This is a project we did in Colombia. We took the children out to discover where they liked, what they liked in their communities, what they didn't like, and all those red dots on the map, the council came in. They were so inspired by documenting the need that they went and built the sidewalks and crossings that children asked for. In Ireland, women want to walk more in that city, but they did a study which showed that they're motorising faster than men in that system, because women have complex travel patterns and they needed their private cars to achieve all the things that they need to do in a day. But you build the evidence base with community consultation and analysis. Why are they not using the public transport, and how do we scale up across Ireland? So you have to understand your groups, you have to understand their needs, document and deliver that data to your authorities. And I want to finish with some inspiration of my own before we hear from the others, because there's been some fundamental changes. COVID has changed the conversation, and Milan is an absolute pin-up in this. Cities used COVID to roll out change very rapidly on the streets and to measure that impact. It didn't stay everywhere, and London is fighting LTNs all the time, but it really did shift the conversation. And this is a great example where in Auckland, they didn't have a lot of money, they didn't have a lot of political support, but they chose a really effective street, a really good initial case study for impact. They did the data, they counted the car parks, they counted the available parking, and they counted the number of people walking. They did some really low, really simple cost interventions. Like, this is not complicated. That is just palleted flooring up one side and some planters, and yet look at the statistical difference. I'm sorry, it's quite hard to read. Urban Pirates keep promising to send me a new version of this. But the urban uplift in terms of support for the project, in terms of reductions in parking, and increase in pedestrian activity and retail activity on that street was well measured. And now, as a result of doing a great project, doing really good evaluation, having the case to take back and argue for more, that's now what's happening. Building the case, arguing for more, making it happen. We're working on these projects around schools. Commercial districts are easier because they have economic uplift, but if you can do these things and build your case, then you can start to ask for something to be different. And we have to ask for something to be different because streets are part of the public space we have in our cities. And if we sacrifice the available public space to storing lumps of metal effectively, don't underestimate the power of our relationship with our cars. But if we can start to lift away that sense of identity that we are our car and our car must be outside our house, then we can allow and enable and create space for all of these other things in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bronwen. You already opened the topic of transforming streets with evidence base and how it is low cost. So I want to jump directly to Hila then. Can you explain us Streets for Kids program a little bit?
Yeah, it's the first part of the presentation, so maybe we can jump into the slide deck and I can start.
Yeah, with the presentation.
And thank you, Bronwen, for an amazing and very inspiring lecture to start us off with the discussion.
I think it's, coming.
Okay.
But
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, when we are waiting the presentation, maybe we can start to talk about Street for Kids and then the presentation. It's go.
Just in time. Okay, so I hope you can hear me now, and just to reiterate, it's very nice to start this theme, and hopefully we will have an interesting discussion later as well. So as Görsev mentioned, my name is Hila. I'm a program associate for the Streets for Kids program at Global Designing Cities Initiative. So at GDCI, our mission is just the greatest. We transform streets around the world. So we partner with city leaders, with practitioners like many of yourselves, with communities, and we try to imagine what's possible when we design streets that make sense for everyone. So our program is supported by the Bernard van Leer Foundation, the FIA Foundation, and Foundation Butner. And by focusing on kids, we are able to tackle some of the greatest challenges we have in cities today. So we can talk about road safety and public health and well-being and air pollution and social inequities all through street design. Because streets, they make up the largest network of continuous public spaces in our cities. They're one of our biggest assets as city makers, and we must make better decisions about them and the way that we use them. When we don't do this, we pay prices. I believe most of us paid them today while we were waiting in traffic or for the signal in the light to turn green. It's probably our biggest assets as human beings, the time we have on Earth, and we're wasting it. We also pay with the quality of the air that we breathe and with the safety and well-being of our children. And even in the environments where children spend most of their days, which is the schools, we often see situations like this, with most of the space allocated to vehicles and motor vehicles, and the students being pushed aside to narrow sidewalks. We are left with streets that are polluted, that are noisy, and are stressful, with very little space left for children and caregivers to be. Those costs come with numbers, so we can quantify them, and I want to share some data with you. So firstly, every day we lose the life of 500 children worldwide for traffic crashes. In many cities, this is the leading cause of death for young children. So this is, of course, a very sad and effective way to show that we are killing children very, very quickly with our decisions about our streets. But it's also important to note the way that we are killing them slowly, harming them slowly by these decisions. Because if we're not planning good streets and inviting them to be outside, they're going to stay indoors. And that comes with another set of dangers, like the statistic with over 80% of teens being insufficiently physically active, which comes with, of course, impacts on their mental and physical health. Even if they do go outside, the air is often polluted. Much of it is due to transportation emissions. And we have this number, which is terrifying, with over 100,000 children under the age of 5 dying from air pollution. Of course, our noisy street in the city also come with other more elusive dangers. If we're talking about reduced ability for children to concentrate, increasing stress levels, and reduced cognitive function. And we have to remember that young children are developing core life skills that will serve them for the rest of their lives. Of course, the flip side of all of these costs are the gains that we fail to achieve. So in this conference, we talk about environmental resiliency. So we are not meeting those goals when we design streets that don't serve all people. We are not building supportive local economies. We are definitely not saving lives. So in the Streets for Kids program, we try to unpack this. So we try to achieve two main goals. The first one is to improve independent mobility. And the way that I like to think about it is just close your eyes and imagine a toddler, age 3, trying to learn how to scoot around the street on a scooter. If you're talking about teens, you might consider a teenager moving around the city using public transportation, a bus or a train. We also try to find spaces and create spaces for pause and stay, thinking about the value of play and for kids to explore and develop their skills. And we are trying to shift our priorities from cars to people, moving away from how cars get from point A to point B, to pedestrians crossing the street, to people using bicycles, taking transit, walking around the city, with the movements of caregivers and children probably the least visible, trying to make those visible and the priority. Also bringing in children as we can to this conversation and getting their take on it. So in the Streets for Kids program, we offer these 5 strategies to create better streets for kids. And in the last year, we've been lucky enough to work with 10 cities that receive our grant and technical support to explore what they can do in their city. And I think in the last year, they've done some remarkable work, so I wanted to share it with you. So I'm going to take you to a very quick tour around the world. So our first strategy is to upgrade and meet basic needs. And of course, if we want to improve independent mobility and improve their places to play, we need to have standards for safety, for accessibility. In this project, in Recife in Brazil, they chosen to improve a school street, but of course it didn't have pavement, right? Big challenge for accessibility. So the first thing they did, the city did, was to bring in pavement for sidewalks, for the roadbed, and then they can think about adding equipment and furniture and greenery. So that's all up next. They're doing this while involving community members with collecting data and involving children with engagement activities as well. The next strategy is to protect. So speed kills, and it kills children more than others. So we want to design for safer speeds. This is a project from Cuenca, Ecuador, connecting an early childhood center to a park. From this street that is highly unregulated with cars going by it fast as they can, to doing sidewalk extensions, shortening crossings, making the children's movements the priority in the space. Our next strategy is to reclaim space, much needed space that could bring in new uses for the street. Now our trip will be very short. We're only going to Maltepe and Istanbul. We reclaimed so much needed space in this area next to a school in Cevizli neighborhood in Maltepe. From these 4 streets next to a school and a kindergarten, reclaiming all the space that you see in green for children and caregivers. Just seconds after the first part of this implementation went on the ground, you can see kids taking their bicycle to the streets, with girls coming out to play, and with caregivers enjoying themselves next to the open market. Very short on time, so I'm just gonna go forward. Our next strategy is to activate, so acknowledging that play is important, that streets provide opportunities, and we need to incorporate this to our everyday life. This project in Lima in Peru is taking a bold decision to pedestrianize the street in front of the school, testing this out for 30 days before they go into permanent. Bringing kids and neighborhoods and the community of the school, trying to understand how to incorporate play, incorporate the needs of the kids and the community. And finally, our strategy to extend, so not only focusing on the street, but the opportunities around the street for underused areas and for other institutions as well. Next stop is Leon in Mexico. This is a school street. And through a process of 2 months long engagement, they actually brought in so many members of the community from local institutions, schools, businesses, and children, trying to bring in different activities and include them in the street. Also asking their opinions and what do they want to see in the street and what type of opportunities they see. These projects go into the first cycle of Streets for Kids project, like this one in Fortaleza in Brazil, which upgraded a street next to a school from a neglected area to reclaiming space for pedestrians, reducing vehicle lanes, speeding down traffic, and allowing pedestrians to take over the street. Making children feel safer, making parents feel more comfortable talking to their kids, enjoying their time with the community. All of these projects are based on our guidelines. 2 of them I wanted to show are also available in Turkish, which is really a cause for celebration, and I invite you to check them out as well. We're very proud to have over 100 cities endorse our guides and use them, including Istanbul in 2020, with other cities adopting them, creating their own guidelines, like this city in Recife in Brazil, who just recently launched their guide in 2023. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the last presentation.
Thank you, Hila. You mentioned, but I want to mention again, if you want to see more details about this, you can find the purple book, Streets for Kids, Çocuklar için Sokaklar. It's already in Turkish, thanks to Superpool. And we are going to our next speaker. I know that as the Milan municipality, the city of Milan, you are also working closely with GDCI, and Chiara, can you share Milan's program, the big program for transforming car-centric streets into some healthy and resilient public spaces?
Thank you, Görsev. I don't know if you can hear me. Thank you also for the presentation. I'm going to present the Piazze Aperte program that started back in 2018. But I'll start from what Milan was doing at the same time. Milan was approved in 2018 a new territorial management plan, which was called Milan 2030, looking to the urban planning for the next 10 years. It was very interesting because it focused a lot on public space as a common good through many tools, the planning master plan, the sustainable urban mobility plan, and the neighborhood plan, all going towards a new way of thinking public space in the city of Milan. But this was stuck with the business as usual. So capital works that costed millions took years and were unreversible and were really difficult to plan all together and answer very fast to the needs of the city. That's why, at the same time, the City of Milan tried this new approach, the tactical urbanism approach, that actually takes thousands of euros and not millions, months and not years, and it's actually reversible. So you can be really, really strong in doing strong interventions, big changes, encountering also more feasibility by the citizens. The objectives were, of course, a resignification of public space as a gathering spot, as an aggregative space, safer neighborhoods for people's mobility, so bicycles, pedestrians, to be safer and can move easily in the neighborhoods. Of course, a community engagement plan and participation in these interventions in all the process, in every phase of the process. And that was very important for the administration in order to anticipate and the benefits of this kind of intervention through experimental solutions, helping make the most correct choices and support for the decision making towards a permanent solution. The elements, the ingredients were very simple: paint, street furniture, curbs and bike racks, greenery in pots because we were not touching the asphalt and the floor, and of course some activators. Ping pong tables are a very effective one, and of course also community events through the involvement of citizens and organizations. In 2018 we started, and in 1 year and a half, 15 plazas were done. It was a very big change and touched many, many people in the city of Milan. It was very important, a very important change for the city. This was a crazy intersection only for cars in front of a school, and in a couple of months it became a school plaza, and now it's one of the most famous plazas we have in Milan. After that, from an experiment, we needed to scale up, to move it to a strategy and then to a urban policy through these three elements: engaging communities, optimizing the process, and maximizing the interventions. We made an open call, which was called Piazze Aperte in every neighborhood, open for citizens and organizations to propose new spots, new places to develop the program. We received 65 proposals, and that was 2020. We were in the middle of starting this new process together with all the citizens. This was on January 2020, the final part of January, and we stopped immediately because COVID came. The lockdown had some troubles, of course, gave some troubles in the city, but there was also a reduction in urban traffic. There was a new urgency for interventions, and in general, less resistance to change. That's why Milan tried to think about a 2020 strategy, so we could actually intervene immediately, and tactical urbanism was very helpful in that direction. We started the Open Streets program, encouraging active mobility. Streets became new public spaces, and we went towards a new 15-minute city. So bicycle lanes were planned, and it was very effective since the beginning because nobody was taking the transit, the public transport. So many new riders per day, and now the bicycles are very common in Milan while there weren't before. There was also, the Play Street program to give kids possibility to do outdoor activities, and this was one example. It's even more tactical because it was everything was removable in 1 day. Outdoor was important also for open-air events and activities. This is Piazza Minniti in Milan. There were also a lot of requests from restaurants, bars, and shops to take space out in the outdoor because they needed it. It was important for the safety of their users. 3,000 requests, 80% approved in a couple of months, and this completely changed the city. informal car parks on the sidewalks, on the green areas, became informal public life. 2 car parks corresponded to 15 people dining. It was a very effective change. We introduced many 15 kilometer speed share zones. It was very important to make people safe also when they were dining in the outdoor. And there were many pedestrianizations in zones in which there were many restaurants and many dining areas. In 2020, there were also many new plazas. This is one of the biggest with a big market in the middle. It was very important to keep continuing this open plazas program. As you can see, the crossing here is pretty complicated, and it became something completely different, and it was very safe. This was all done together with the community, and that is key to the program. What now? We had more than 30 plazas at the end of the year, involving half of the city of Milan, half of the population of Milan, within 15 minutes from their house. It was a very big change, and it was very effective. Now in 2023, we focus on every school. Open plazas for every school is a new call, for mostly for schools and school communities, open for this kind of interventions in front of schools. Many protests were going on because people didn't feel safe, kids didn't feel safe in front of schools. This is a protest, a spontaneous protest. One morning in a school where there were many accidents involving kids. This is one of the first schools of this year in which we intervened. This is before, and this is after, when the kids were going out of school. The change is incredible, and I think the path is very clear. Even if we have two paths, we can answer the needs of this kid, or we don't, because I mean it's gonna be not anymore a kid after 10 years when capital works are gonna arrive. Just a last thing that I want to stress: the importance of the community and the city engagement in this program, since we are doing everything together, since the proposal and the co-design, and then the real painting of the paving is something that gives a lot of sense, a lot of community sense, and it's a very important moment also for kids to understand what they are doing, feel the space is their own. There are some of the pictures I wanted you to see. And one last before and after that we love a lot. This is in the middle of 2 streets. It's an informal car parking space. It became very quickly, together with citizens, this space, and the change is great. Streets are public spaces are for people, and people build communities. Communities fight for change. Thank you.
Thank you, Chiara. It's really amazing to see this, all of the 30 examples. Is you know, like Italy is kind of the starter of the concept of a public space, public square. You are really good at that, but in that version, I see that you also invented a new version of creating public spaces in the Piazza Aparte program. So I want to ask some questions to my speakers, and then I'll let you ask the questions, so you can also prepare some questions right now. I want to start as a question to Bronwen. Bronwen, in Marmara Municipalities Union, we are organizing like many trainings and events, and we are inviting both practitioners and the decision makers, but basically I am especially working with practitioners a lot. And after amazing events that like all the participants love the topic, they believe the topic, but then they ask the question like, how can I convince my decision maker in my municipality especially, how we can make them understand this value of walking and reclaiming the streets. how we can open their hearts and eyes, and you're working on that, so do you have some suggestions for us?
Yeah, I'm absolutely blown away by what's happening in Milan and around the world. I love coming and sharing panels with the people who are doing this work, because what's inspiring here is that Milan, the government, was on board already. You didn't necessarily have to analyze every corner and decide what to do. You just had a principle which said, we are going to make better public space, and we're going to do it for children, and we're going to do it with the community. But not everywhere is so fantastic, and you provide a beacon of hope for other cities. And I see those pictures and I think, what about, where did those cars go? And how did they fight back to that? Because what we see happening in the UK is that all of the initiatives that came in the COVID, the local traffic neighbourhoods, and now even the 15-minute neighbourhood are falling victim to conspiracy theories and aggression and a response like this. So from our perspective, you need these examples. You have to point to a city, because everyone is really good at saying, oh, that's lovely, that's Milan, that will never work here. And so frequently. It's just the absolute number one thing. That will always work over there. There's all these reasons why it won't work here. And I always am inspired by Jan Gell, who was inspired by the Italians and their use of plazas to go back to Denmark, not exactly a Mediterranean or warm country, and spend 30 years transforming the streets of Copenhagen by saying we can be different, we can imagine our public spaces differently, and year by year changing over car parks and inviting people out into public space to the famous city that Copenhagen is now. So you have to find those little things that you can bring back to your city, to your decision makers. It might be paint. Children are fantastic, but it's shocking to me that people still think it's more important to drive and park outside schools than enable children to walk freely to their schools. So find the lever. This is my key point. Find the lever that motivates your politicians, that motivates your decision makers, because these things have so many different benefits. If road safety is your agenda, make it about road safety. If public life is your agenda, make it about public life. If physical activity is the agenda, make it about physical activity. If the environment is the agenda, make it about emissions and clean air and environmental change. You can leverage all of these imperatives to deliver the streets that you've seen from my colleagues here and to promote the concept of walking. And the other thing despite the displacement of the vehicles which we celebrate, you can do so much without actually having to navigate vehicle displacement. As you saw from Hila with all of her different stages, there's so much that can be done for small amounts of money and really effectively. So be cost effective, find the lever that they really want to use. And I'm still a big fan, start small, build your base, and then scale up and grow that, local example so they can't displace the sense that it won't work here. Show that it can.
Thank you so much. As you said, in fact, these transformations have many agendas. They fit every agenda, in fact. It can be related to climate change, it can be related to health, active mobility and everything. So yeah, everyone can find what agenda you have in your municipality and then match it with the transformation and show one and then multiply maybe. So Hila, I have a question for you. Yeah, we are first starting with these temporary things to show what we can do to make people imagine what they can have, because before then, if you ask if can we take your car park, even if the people don't have a car, they say no, I want this car park. But then if you put a bench on it and then sitting on the bench near a plant, asking the same question, the answer also can change. But then, what happens to, what should we do to go to the next step, to make a permanent change in that area? What you suggest, and what are the common challenges that you see in these cities you work with, and how did they solve it?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. I think it really relates to the answers that Bronwen just gave as to how to create change. I think it's very different for each city. I'm not gonna presume there's like one way to do it. And of course, everyone takes their own sort of like opportunities that they see and how to tie in different agendas. I think some of the ways that people go from sort of temporary into permanent, it's just, as Bronwen mentioned, sort of collecting the data, making the case. I was in a panel in the morning about children's priorities, and one of the speakers said something like, when we evaluate what we are doing, we're actually doing kind of good, but like, we don't really report on things, so we don't really gather the information, so we're not always aware of different things that we're doing. So one thing that I see a lot of cities that we work with are doing quite well and helping them make the case to go into permanent, it's sort of getting organized, getting your story straight, getting data from before you did the transformation and then comparing it into the after data, showing that you actually had impact. I think something that we miss sometimes is also talking to the people and sort of documenting their stories. I know like the 21st century is all about storytelling, but in this case, I think it actually does make sense to bring in those unique perspectives. So it's no longer just a picture of the girl playing on top of those balls that I show you in Maltepe, but also how she sees it, how meaningful it is for her, how meaningful it is for her caregiver to go outside. And I think all of those things help to convince others. It's always a good idea to sort of try to be in their shoes and understand what type of data, what type of information is important for them and try to tap into this. Just like you mentioned, people have different agendas and you can try to look for the funder that is interested in health and try to talk to the school that is interested in doing outdoor activities and educational curriculum. So it's basically trying to navigate your way into the world, but in the perspective of streets. I think sometimes it takes a bit of courage also to say, okay, we did this for a while, and now we're ready to take it to the next level, and we're ready to say that we tested it, and it works, and now we're going to do something more permanent, and it's also another step that we need to take. I think showing example is very meaningful, and I don't think it's a coincidence that all of us try to give as many case studies and colorful picture and emotional stories about this, because often people won't believe until they see that other people in Milan, I think, is an amazing inspiration for other cities as well to say they did it. I think I can do it too. And yeah, I think I mentioned in my presentation endorsing our guide. I know it sounds very salesman pitch type thing, but actually I think it's a good way to embed policy. So when you come to other people in your city, to engineers or decision makers that might not be aligned and say, we got someone to put a stamp on this and say that this guide makes sense. It makes sense for other cities, it makes sense for your city. And then I think moving to permanent might be a bit easier. So I would also urge you to think about it as well and consider it as an option. And yeah.
Thank you. I know that it really needs hard work to make the first transformation, and I can see in our teams also we have a program together with GDCI and Superpool, which calls Street Transformation Program. It's basically a practice-oriented learning program, and you can see also the outcomes in the exhibition hall. And we saw that like in every one, after this big opening, like the people are really hardworking to open, and then after the big opening, then what? Like everyone stays calm. But I can see Inegöl here, for example, the city of Inegöl, the day after the big opening, and they were really exhausted, and they asked us, okay, we went to the place, and what we have to collect, and we were like, oh, we want to cry. It's so awesome to also see some cases like that. And in this program, like 10 cities tried first this street transformation. There's in Turkey only one city, Maltepe, which is not city but ilçe. Yes, district, yeah. Thank you. The Maltepe district working with GDCI, and they transformed multiple streets, but other than like in our program, 10 cities tried their first attempt, successful attempt. But my question is how they can turn these singular experiences into some comprehensive program just in Milan case, and how or can we turn these tactics into strategies?
Thank you for the question, Görsev. I think in the presentation I told you that community is the main ingredient to do this kind of interventions to me, because we started from that point. In the beginning, the first 2 prototypes were completely top-down. There were, of course, some interviews, some surveys that were done, but in the end, it was the municipality that decided where to do it and how to do it. It was a big change when we decided to invert completely the process and start from the proposals from citizens, because they were involved since the beginning, and we had interlocutors with which we could actually design the new spaces and think about their needs, and think about the needs of the community and not in general only city users. And in a vision that comes from outside of the neighborhood, of course, you cannot really understand what do they need. And finally, doing it together, I think it was very effective in order to build a community around this kind of interventions and also maintain it, activate it, and taking care of it in general. This process was very effective in building a strategy in which the administration and the municipality is not alone doing this kind of interventions, but it's the city itself that is asking, and we are doing it together, and if it's not okay, we can plan it again and redesign it and rethink of it. And I think this can take a little bit of longer time, because of course co-design is not easy and we know it, but still I think that is the main ingredient in doing a bigger program and try to answer the different needs in the neighborhoods, and also have some consensus around these kind of interventions. Of course, there is also a problem inside the municipalities. I wanted to add to Bronwen's intervention, even in Milan, there is a lot of conflict, a lot of problems. So, of course, as is, no, it's not perfect at all. And also inside the administration, there are technicians that are against this kind of process. Of course, all the time. But I think it's very important to optimize the process and try to make the different sectors inside of the administration talk together and work together and absorb this kind of approach that is low cost, is fast. We need to answer very fast to this need, and then we see how it is going, and we observe it and we monitor it. And thanks to that, I think it can really become a strategy and a urban policy that fits in the middle between the status quo and the capital work that takes too long to be there to answer the questions the city itself asks.
I just would really love to add the experience of London to this process, and that's embedding the new standard into the street design guidelines, so that, and we've talked about it, we've touched on it, but what they did in London was Transport for London owns a certain number of roads and locals own different roads. Every time they went out to do road maintenance and road refits and road redesign, so they're not building lots of new spaces, but it's not the temporary interventions. They just had new expectations about how to build public space for people on foot and to manage bike lanes. So the arguments internally can't be argued anymore, because this is now the new expectation. It doesn't happen overnight, but that process of addressing some of that internal conflict was answered by TfL in London with guidelines. So everywhere you go, you see this, not as glamorous sometimes or as beautiful as these changes, but just everywhere, wider footpaths, build out space, different things happening for people on foot.
Yeah. And I think like showing the first example of like turning this streets into public spaces, it really works to make increase the pressure of community, because then the community also start to ask for new spaces. In every example that we see, like people started to say, okay, sometimes they are angry. They are saying that you are only doing to this district, but we also want in this district, but it's good. Then they need. So, okay, we have one question from the application. Eylül Kırtoğlu from our audience asked a question to you, Chiara. While transforming public spaces in the name of squares, how do you preserve cultural heritage, since Italy has cultural aspects in every street of it?
Well, cultural heritage is not everywhere. I mean, there are many places. Of course, the city centers are more delicate in this point of view, and we have to take care of one more actor, which is the Cultural Heritage Protection Office. And of course, I think that tactical urbanism, now we see many pictures that include asphalt art, which is very attractive, very effective in making very clear to people that are just passing by that something is happening over there. But it's an ingredient that is not every time super necessary. It's useful when you have just asphalt and standard streets. But I think, for example, if you're planning to intervene in a historical plaza with classical paving, something more different, you can actually do tactical interventions without asphalt art, and that can make it easier. It's just street furniture, it's just activation together with the community, it's just a few elements that include, for example, connections, bicycle connections between the different spots, and I think it can work in the same way. As you can see, in any case, there are many, many places that are not, that actually, before the tactical intervention, were completely useless. They were not standard plazas, they were just streets and places for cars and parking lots. So we started from a pretty different point, I think.
Thank you. We have a little time, because we started a little bit late. If there is any, yes, there is a question there. But we need microphone.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't have a place for the app at my phone. Thank you for all the presentation. You all talk about the community engagement and how the communities participate, making the streets more walkable and livable. But I couldn't help but wonder how these communities involve the processes after this transformation happens, because especially keeping streets safe is a never-ending job, particularly in developing countries. And I'm not only talking about the security in terms of accessibility and being car-free. The increasing level of crime and drug consume in the streets, especially in developing countries, is a huge street security issue. And I would like to ask that when you are designing this kind of placemaking projects, what kind of parameters you are taking into consideration in terms of this kind of security issues, and what kind of collaborations are you making with local government?
To who? Your question?
Maybe to Hila, because she is more working in developing countries, I guess, but to all of you, actually.
I can start us off, and then maybe others can also add their own point of view. I think you packaged a couple of very interesting questions together, so maybe I can cover the safety aspect first, because it's, I think, more streamlined. So as I mentioned, we have a couple of premises, and like if you go back to the 5 strategies that I shared, I think our basic premise is that we first need to take care of the safety issues, especially, like there are different also types of safety, right? So some streets are unsafe for children and caregivers because of security reasons, others are unsafe because of traffic. So if we talk about traffic in our guidelines, there are quite a lot of very hopefully easy instructions as to how you can create streets that are safer in terms of speed, so slowing speed by design, instead of just saying this street is now I don't know, 50 kilometers per hour or 30 kilometers per hour, we can design the street to make the driver understand that he is a guest in the street, he needs to slow down, and that increases the options that he will also yield to pedestrians, take turns more slowly, and just makes children that are shorter more visible for the drivers. I'm doing like a very short version of this, but if you're interested, I'm really happy to share the resources. And as Görsev says, we have it in Turkish as well, so it's just a great resource to have. In terms of the community engagement, I have to say this is something very different in context. I feel like sometimes we think that we as designers or planners, we come to a street and we have to bring the community as if the community was not aware that things were problematic on the street. I'm gonna share one example from León in Mexico, which I showed you before. Once the team from the city went to the site to collect the data before the intervention, they went to the high school and they saw that like afternoon, the school was out, kids were leaving the school, and they saw the principal going out of the school and just put up a tape, like a police tape, to extend the sidewalk. And they found out something that they didn't know before, that like a month before they went into the site, a teen was hit by a hit and run by a car and was injured. Like, thank God he wasn't severely injured, but he was injured. And the kid's mom went to the principal and she said she wouldn't have it, they have to change something. So they did what they can, they did it with like a tape, and they did it every day. So they sort of had a pop-up intervention of sorts. But of course, once the team from the city was there and they had like the extra resources and some time to think it over and to redesign the street, they could offer something that made more sense. So of course, not all of the community members were concerned about this, but some community members, arguably the more important community members in this case, were. So community, I think, often is something that is already there. We might not be aware of, especially as an urban planner myself, like working on the desk, you don't always think about things like this or are aware of things like this are happening. So I would say community engagement as a first step is probably just to go outside and talk to people. And I think sometimes we're surprised about the partners that are actually there just waiting.
Thank you. Do you want to add something?
I just pick up on the security aspect, and the antisocial behavior aspect. And what you find, from my understanding, and again, I'm sure it's not ever perfect, but when you come in and make these interventions, you do displace that sense of rundownness. You know, the old broken window theory that once a window breaks and the graffiti comes in and the rubbish collects and things escalate and accumulate. But once you show that you're caring and looking after a space and that you're addressing some of those local concerns, you do get a displacement of some of that antisocial behavior. That doesn't mean it has necessarily gone away, and there are broader societal challenges that changing the way we work our streets aren't going to address. Like, let's be realistic about what we can achieve with street transformations, which is a huge amount compared to what we knew, 10, 15 years ago. But there is some things which can't be addressed by that. But there's also some things which we shouldn't let determine what we do, because, for example, in my hometown of Brisbane, they took away all the benches because drug users and women sat on them at night time and created antisocial behavior. It also meant that old people couldn't go to the shops in the daytime because they had nowhere to sit and rest on their journey to those shops. We can't ask our streets to do everything. We can't ask our physical interventions to do everything. What we can do is take a positive approach, create spaces that the community values. We did a fantastic graffiti wall project in a really rundown development in England. And it was done by the local teenagers, and it never got messed with. They loved their local art. They suddenly had something to be proud of. Instead of tagging all the buildings and making a mess with their graffiti, they were suddenly had something to be proud of. You can't deal with all of it, but you can find ways to empower people to appreciate those spaces and make them better for them.
Thank you. So maybe, yeah.
No, quickly, I perfectly agree with what Bronwen said, and I just want to add a couple of things that comes that come to my mind about security. For sure, you can, as a designer, prevent some of the antisocial behaviors in designing the plaza, the space in which you're working on. And at the same time, you can have to understand that this kind of intervention, of course, it cannot do everything, but still, I think also it's very easy and very tricky, this thing, but pushing a little bit further, a little bit away the parking spots, far from your home, you have to walk, I don't know, 100 meters more, 200 meters more, but you activate that space by walking that 100 meters. And I think that's pretty effective in changing how the neighborhood is lived, because you move a little bit more, and just car passing by are not giving any kind of security, while pedestrians and people in general are moving by foot or by bicycle, and that can help very much also that kind of approach. So leaving that space can change actually the way it's been used till now.
Thank you so much. So thank you for our speakers and the participants. I just want to summarize it and finish this session. So first, make your case and find the agenda of the city and meet with the agenda and convince the decision makers for the first attempt. So make it happen for the first time and show what a change looks like to everyone. And then don't stop and scale it up. So, okay, thank you very much.